fairly quickly. So that would be another example of how chunking down could kind of change a person's perception of it. Probably one of the best examples I know of this was from a guy, it's from Milton Erickson, actually, a guy we all know. And Milton had a lady who who came to him, who had been trying to learn to read for 50 years without success. And what he found was, I mean, this woman had been so anxious to read that she used to board all the local school teachers. And she would board them for free in exchange for them trying to tutor her in reading. Now we're talking, he did this 50 years, and at the time she met Erickson, she had 3 teachers boarding at her house. And no one was getting anywhere. And they all kind of described the same thing, that she would go, they'd start to teach her to read, and she'd just kind of blank out and freeze up. And then she'd just kind of be spaced out for this whole time. Now, she said, oh, I want to read so much, I want to do this, you know, Dr. Erickson, can you please help me, can you use hypnosis, something like that. And he thought about it for a while, and he did 2 things that were extremely significant. First one was pacing. And what he did was, he said to her, well, I think I can teach you to read, but you have to do everything that I tell you to do, so long as you can already do it. And she kind of looked confused for a moment. Because what he said was, you have to follow exactly everything I tell you to do, as long as you can already do it. So notice this is kind of an interesting thing, you know, she's agreeing to something, she doesn't know exactly what he's talking about, but it's kind of interesting. So then what he does is he gives her a pencil. And he says, you hold this pencil in your hand. A baby can hold a pencil, so you can hold a pencil. That's something you can already do. Now take this pencil and poke it at this paper. I mean, a baby can do that, you know. And now make a line like this and a circle like that. And he just had to start making, I mean, a baby could make marks on a piece of paper. Making marks. And, you know, he has her get some like this and some like that. And, you know, finally kind of works around various elements that would have to go together to make an alphabet. Then he has her go home that night, and she has to practice that, you know, for at least 2 hours that night. Just practice making marks. She makes marks. The next day she comes in, and he has her start just making marks by each other. So he has to make a mark here, and then make one of these rounded ones there, and then just a mark like this there, and maybe one like that, and one like that. You know, he's just having her make marks until she can do it. You know, she's just making marks. Just combining them together, but, you know, a baby could do that, and, you know, she could already make them, so just put them next to each other. That's easy enough. Great. She goes home, and he has her practice just these particular ones, just making these little sets of marks. And then he instructs her for the next day, she's to come in and bring some stuff that she wants to read. Okay. The next day she comes in. He goes. The first thing he starts off with, he says, this is a plan, a floor plan for a barn that's 20 feet by 40 feet, because she was a rural person. Okay, so she was kind of a down-home type person and had always worked on the farm, never had any education. So he goes, this is a plan for a 20-foot by 40-foot barn. She goes, yeah. Then he draws it in half, and he goes, and this is a plan for 2 20-foot by 20-foot barns. She goes, yeah, so what? So, okay, so then he goes on, and he has her take her marks. She writes down all the marks again. And then he does this really interesting thing where he has her take a book she brought. And they start looking at the book, and he goes, oh my God, this book uses a mark that you made. You know, look at that. It uses a mark that you made. You know, and it's another, oh, look, there's another mark that you made. Now, notice, he wasn't, I think it's really important, he didn't say, you made a mark in the book. The book was using a mark that she made. Interesting, I mean, there's a presupposition there. Wow, that's interesting. He spent the whole time finding out how this book was using marks she knew how to make. Then he said, now, now, you know, everything has a name. Like, you know, this is a horseshoe. And he took a horseshoe. Yeah, that has a name. And, you know, this is a stick, and this is this. So everything has a name. So now these marks that she made, since she already knew how to name things, that was easy. She could name things in her kitchen, name objects. So he just wanted to learn how to name the marks. So she learned how to name the marks, you know, A and B. She made names for them. They had her go home and practice that. And the next thing he had her do was to start to put them together, like the barn, the two 20-foot barns, and all this stuff. So all this stuff she already understood. So he had her start putting these marks next to each other. And he said, now, when you put marks next to each other like this, you know, just like you know that a chair has a leg, and it has a back, and it has a seat, but the whole thing is a chair, you know that this set of marks has the name B and an O and O and a K, but there's also a name for the whole marks together. That's book. So he had her take some marks, and I mean, she already do that. She knew how to name things. So he had her go and take, and she named all these marks. And then the final thing he did was then he had her start writing down some of these things. So he had her like, he wrote down one here, and one here, and one here. And she's having her write all this stuff down. One here, one here, something like that. Then he had her name them all in a row. And like, so it was like, get going, Ma, and get grub, or something. And she said, well, that's what Pa always says to me. Because he just had her, after he had her write them down, not in order, he just had her read them all in a row. Just read all the marks that she'd made. Well, that's just like talking. Well, yeah, you know how to talk. And of course, I think you can see that by that point, she already had all the basic skills. So what he did was real interesting. He built a presupposition. I'm not going to ask you to do anything that you can't already do. And so it has to be, it's put into frames of things. He's not going to teach her how to read. He's not going to teach her anything new. He's going to just teach her how to do things that she can already do. And then he chunked it down into small enough pieces that there was no way that she could not be able to accomplish them. So that would be an example of, here he chunked down over a large piece of time. But that's the kind of thing that we're talking about here. A person may not be able to read, but they can make marks, and they can name things, and they can combine marks, and learn the names for combined things. Well, that's all they need. So that's one of the real interesting values of chunking down to get your way around a belief. Chunking up, on the other hand, you can see here as if it goes, well, this house has cost too much of a pile of money. I can say, well, it's not just a house, it's your castle. It's your cave, and it's primal, you know, the caves and, you know, these are always the most important thing for everybody to have. It's a, here you have a fortress against the outside world. That's not what it is. What is that worth? So by chunking it up to a bigger level issue, it kind of changes your perception of it as well. So I think that that's becomes a, I mean, by making it into something bigger and fit into this bigger class, once again, it changes your perception. So chunking up, instead of going down to doors and windows and trees, it's going to castles and caves and igloos and all these things that are really basic parts of human experience. How much is that worth? Change frame size. What I did over here is, I'm trying to use a little metaphor. One frame, you look at the house and you go, it's too expensive. But if you look at the bigger frame and see the big bad wolf coming, now do you want a house of brick or a house of straw, you know? So, I mean, the change frame size, when you look at here, you go, well, I don't know, this brick house, it looks like a lot of trouble, too much, I mean, it's the Three Little Pigs, right? Too much trouble to make, I want to go out and have fun. But if I see that the big bad wolf is coming, which one do I want? So that's what change frame size is. What do I include in my total picture? Okay? Which is different than chunking up. This is trying to relate it to bigger categories. Counterexample is just, can I find a time when somebody had one part of the belief and not the other? I mean, the belief